This is going to be a short presentation on two major phenomena that took place during the time of the Age of Exploration, the time that we're studying in chapters 15 and 16. And these two phenomena are first, the Columbian Exchange, and then secondly, triangular trade. So I want you to understand both of these, and I may put a little short answer or essay question on the test in which you understand these two worldwide phenomena. So let's look at number one first. We have what's called here the Columbian Exchange. Now the Columbian Exchange, its name is based on Christopher Columbus. Columbus was the brave and enterprising explorer, obviously, that sailed under the guidance of Ferdinand and Isabella and came over and discovered the New World. And that opened up the first global age. And so there was great communion, commingling. There was great cultural exchange and biological exchange between the New World and what's called the Old World. And so the Columbian Exchange, usually we say, took place in like the 15th and 16th centuries, but it's still going on in a sense. And really, ultimately, the Columbian Exchange united basically, Western Europe with America, and that combination, which we call the West, has been the most powerful force in the recent history of the world. Now that's maybe changing now. Okay, so specifically the Columbian Exchange, some of the things that were exchanged, and you don't have to know all these, but maybe a couple of them would be helpful. Let's look at some of the things that went from the New World to the Old World. Okay, so here I've got listed some things that are on your table almost every day. Corn, potatoes, tomatoes, tobacco, of course that's not on your table, and vanilla. Those are things we use, but which they didn't have in the Old World until this exchange took place. So things we take for granted, corn, tomatoes, potatoes, tobacco, and vanilla, began new in the 15th and 16th century. On the other hand, things that came from the Old World to the New World in terms of the biological world, apples. We wouldn't have had Johnny Appleseed. Lettuce, onions, peppers, carrots, things we put on our salad, we wouldn't have if they hadn't come from the Old World to the New. Coffee. Many people, Starbucks would be out of business without that. And then many kinds of fruits, all different kinds of fruits, not all fruits, but many fruits. And then wheat. Do you like bread? Wheat came from the Old World to the New World at that time. Animals that were exchanged. Horses. There wouldn't be any horses in America at all if they hadn't come over from Cortez and then all the other explorers that brought horses. Sheep, chickens, cows, pigs. Do you like to eat chicken? Do you like to eat pork? You wouldn't be able to if there hadn't been this Columbian Exchange. Some animals that came from the New World to the Old, the turkey, which Benjamin Franklin wanted to make the national bird of America, and the guinea pig. So not as many, obviously, going from the New World to the Old. Probably the most debilitating part of the exchange was the infectious diseases that Europeans in the Old World brought to the New World, ultimately killing about 90% of the native Indians that were here because they didn't have an immunity to all these European diseases. So that was maybe a terrible part of the Columbian Exchange. And some people will talk about, too, the exchange of ideas. And ultimately, it was the ideas of the industrialization that Europe underwent, the sense of freedom that came from America, this new land, and joining up freedom and industry sort of led to this tremendous leverage of technology that we have today. Ultimately, a fruition, you could say, of the Columbian Exchange. So the number one thing that happened in terms of the global exchange that took place during the Age of Exploration, the Columbian Exchange, the exchange of goods from one continent to another. Let's look at the second phenomenon now, triangular trade. Triangular trade has as part of its story the very unfortunate and ugly history of the slave trade. When slaves were brought over from Africa to the New World, especially in the West Indies, that was called the Middle Passage. So they'd be, put into these slave ships, went through this horrible, torturous journey in which many of them died on ship because they were packed so tightly. And then they came over. So if that's called the Middle Passage, that's just the name that's come for that. Then the triangle part of this triangle trade, there must be a first part. If this is the middle of something, what's on the two sides of it? So this would be the first leg of the trade right here. So what happened? Up in the industrialized England and in Europe, they would manufacture guns. They would take the sugar cane and turn it into rum. and they would manufacture other things. So these manufactured goods, obviously, they didn't have in Africa. There wasn't an industrial juggernaut there then. And so guns were brought down, rum. Slave traders really ended up pushing rum onto in West Africa because rum has a higher alcohol content than wine did. And so, more of it, less of it could go farther in terms of, I hate to say it, but getting drunk or getting high or whatever. And so rum and guns came down here, and so the slave traders wanted the guns and they wanted the rum, and for that they would give the slaves. So now the slaves are going to the boats that had brought down the guns and the rum. So that was the first leg of the triangular trade, from the industrialized nations of Europe and England coming down, giving their manufactured goods in exchange for the slaves. Now the slaves in the Middle Passage come across the Atlantic in that horrible misuse of humanity, the slave trade. And then we often think in terms of the history of our South of cotton being grown, and we needed slaves for cotton. But a much bigger crop than that was the sugar cane that was in the West Indies. And so the slaves would be bought by the slave owners here, by the plantation owners, and they would pay in sugar cane, because that was the big crop that came out of here. And then the sugar cane, okay, so completing the triangle now, the sugar cane would go back, especially in the form of molasses, which is the liquid form that would come off the sugar cane, and that would then be manufactured or distilled into rum, because you can't just turn sugar into rum. It takes a manufacturing process. The manufacturing was up here in Europe and England, and so the rum would be manufactured along with guns and other things, and then the cycle would start over. These guns, these guns would come down here, slaves would be put on, slaves would be brought over here in exchange for sugarcane would be bought here, they would buy it in the mills, and then in what they'd get in exchange would be manufactured goods and come down here. So that's triangular trade. So you should understand those two great systems that initiate in this first global age, the age of exploration and colonization. Number one, the Columbian Exchange, and number two, triangular trade.
Every day when I open my